Hey, Wholeness, this is Josh with the quick pre-roll intro. Due to the sensitive nature of the content and topic here, I had AI come up with a content warning, which is a good idea for things like this, given that Insight Timer doesn't even allow anything remotely related to this, really. With that, this episode contains open and honest conversations about suicide, grief, and mental health. While we aim to support awareness and healing, some content may be triggering for listeners. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out to a mental health professional or call a local support line. In the United States, the Suicide Crisis Lifeline is available at 988. You're not alone. And with the end of that, please enjoy this conversation with Thomas Brown.
Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh Dippold of Inner Skilled and Integrating Presence. And today I have with me Thomas Brown. Thomas, what's going on today?
I'm doing pretty good, Josh. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this conversation, and I hope that your audience finds some value in it. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this again because we've done this. This is the third take now, and it's I have to do, I guess, I don't know. You'll see pretty quick why this might be a sensitive topic for some, actually probably for many. So let's just keep it going with my standard question here and throw it back to you and say, who is Thomas Brown and what kind of work does he do?
Thank you. That's always like an interesting question to ask because we're more than one thing, and I am definitely more than one thing. I would start by saying that I'm an awareness junkie. I'm a self-awareness junkie. I think to me, expanding awareness, expanding self-awareness, spatial awareness, and social awareness is the only game in town. Religion is cool. It teaches its thing. I'm a total stan for Joseph Campbell, but I'll use all things as a tool for self-awareness and awareness. How I came to this started with the loss of my brother, Mark Brown, back in 2001. He took his own life. And I can get into some of my theories as to what was the root cause to make that decision, or feel like he was backed into a corner where it was the only decision to make. And I say that like decision is kind of like a weird term to put in like that. When people are in emotional turmoil, like my brother was, it's not that they want to leave this world and they don't want to live anymore. It's just that they want to end the pain. So I think it's important to like have that caveat, and they don't know any other way to end the pain. They've tried other things. And also back in 2001, men and men's mental health wasn't part of the social zeitgeist at the time. So
Not at
now,
all.
yeah. So how do I do that now? It took me a long time before I actually sought out help. I was never against expressing my emotions. I was a little bit of an outlier from even some of my friends. I probably even exhausted some of my friends. I've always been like a very emotional person. By meaning like I didn't mind expressing my emotions. I didn't mind crying if I was sad. And my friends were really, really good about like allowing me the space, but they weren't very good practitioners in expressing their emotions. And just because I expressed
As most guys, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
just because I express my emotions doesn't mean that they were always expressed in the healthiest of ways. You know? So it was
Well, that goes for
but
everybody,
yeah,
So,
yeah. But I was never afraid to say I was sad. I didn't really have the terminology to be like, hey, I'm depressed and I need help. I was just like, oh, that's what friends are for. We all help each other. So it took me a while before I finally, found myself in a therapist's office, and that's what really started my journey of self-discovery. And Kim really helped me, taught me how to unravel my own onion, and how to like be aware. And for the first technique that she really taught me was like just learn how to breathe, pay attention to your breath, pay attention to your body. And that was like starting a relationship with my own body was really my first step in cultivating awareness. So a few years after meeting Kim, I end up meeting a friend of mine, Zach, who had also lost his brother. And it took us about 6 months before we decided that we should do a bike ride across the country. We were both really into art and music and literature, and to us, like, art is the thing, is like a social. People say alcohol is a social lubricant, but I really think like art and creativity is like much more of an unnoticed, unrecognized social lubricant. Things that bring us together, things that people in the office or around the water cooler are talking about, creative things, whether it's the movie they saw, the television they saw, or the books that they're reading, or the music that they're listening to. I would even go so far as to say that sports is a form of artistic expression. It's a weird kind of like dance. What athletes have to do to perfect their body, to push that into to push it beyond limits, is its own form of like creative expression. So to us, like, art was really, really powerful. Was a really powerful tool for our own healing and for communal healing. So we wanted our bike ride for suicide awareness to also have the positivity of the importance of art and how art can be used as a tool for your own self-excavation and self-discovery. So by doing this, we started our bike ride at the northern edge of the Golden Gate Bridge. There's a documentary called The Bridge about people that have gone there to end their lives. And then we decided to end at the Golden Gate Bridge in upstate New York in Wappingers Falls. The Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. Sorry, I'm stuck on the Golden Gate Bridge. We ended our bike ride at the Art Retreat Center, the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors, which is owned by Alex and Allison Gray. They are both visionary artists, very much into psychedelic journeys and the collective consciousness, and how for them art and creativity in their psychedelic journeys was part of the tool of their self-discovery and healing path. So after that bike ride, which took 7 months, and we didn't do a straight line, we did a giant W through the country. It took us 7 months to do it. We found a few cities that we just decided to stop and hang out for like 5 days, a couple days just for R&R, rest our legs, rest our minds, rest our hearts, because we were stopping at crisis centers and speaking with local activists and people who lost their loved ones to suicide, and talking with therapists and lawmakers and even law enforcement, and just having like a conversation about mental health and the epidemic of suicide here in the United States. And so it really got to the point where like the bike riding, as grueling as it was on our body, was kind of like a way to exercise the demons of all the conversational energy that we were engaging in. Because like sometimes we'd be with a group and there's like 6 people in there, and other times we'd speak with a group and there's like 100, 200, 300 people, and we're having these like conversations. We do our little presentation just to share our story, and then we have people in the audience, raising their hand, sharing their story. And then after that's all done, you just got a line of people coming in and sharing their stories about their loss, or sharing the stories about like where they feel lost and they're on the verge of they've been thinking about taking their lives. So it was a really, really heavy journey, not only physically but mentally and emotionally. But it was also, for me, it was a way that I tested my mettle to like discover who I was. It was my quintessential Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And when I got back, it was really like, okay, what do I do now? Do I have to do anything? Can I just take what I've learned and try to be better for my circle of influence? And to me, like, that's become the most important thing, like being a decent person, being a good person, recognizing people, not just being on autopilot, not just being like a robot, You know, when I'm at a store or any type of like business and somebody is serving me, I always ask people their name, or I call them by their name. I pay attention to their name badge and try to like let them know that I see a human being. And I think that's like the most important thing. Like the to be somebody that is focused on healing or contributing to a positive point of social healing. I don't think you have to always have your own business where you have clients. You know what I mean? It's just being a decent person and how you interact with the world. So, you know, when I came back, I got a job with the city. I just wanted like a standard job while I concentrated on my book. I'd gone to film school. I was much more of a visual artist. I loved photography. I loved still and motion photography. But I really always wanted to write, and so I wrote, and it took me a long time to find my voice as a writer. That itself was its own epic journey. I One of the things that I did too was when I got back, I got trained to become a facilitator so that I could meet with groups of people twice a month who had lost loved ones to suicide, and just like navigate the group and give people the space to share their story and to share their pain and to be in community with other people, and just seeing how other people, you know, you have somebody come in and there's their first time and they're like a week out from losing their loved one, and then like 6 months later, 9 months later, they're not fully healed because it's not something you truly heal from. It's more of a wound that you learn how to carry, but they actually became like important for the group. They helped me carry the group because now they're like 9 months, 6 months out, 9 months out, and then a newbie comes in and they've gone through the fire, they've walked through the dark wilderness, and now they're able to use their story to help provide some hope for somebody else who's like just new to it. Um, I in my professional career, as I've been writing the book, I started, you know, still personally, I was writing the book, and I started a podcast called Inner Monologue, which started out as an interview show. It's now kind of like a diary. It could be an interview show if I have a guest on from time to time. So I was really concentrating on that. And I never really took a lot of stock in my professional life because to me, I was a creative. I was an artist, which is probably why I was so emotional when I was younger. And I found myself working at the public library, first as a courier and then as a library aide where I worked the front desk, and now I'm a supervisor. And I've started to bring in the things into work that I've been passionate about. Like I'm creating a podcast for the public library. I'm joining a citywide peer support group, where like if anybody is having any stress or anxiety or depression and they need somebody who works in the city with them to like talk to about it, and being trained in that. And I'm just really trying to, you know, take everything that I learned from the bike ride and that I've learned since the bike ride and in my own journey of self-awareness and self-discovery and awareness, and just try to imbue it in everything that I do. And I think the library is one of those professions in our society that's super important because, you know, you're surrounded by all types of people. You have young kids that are learning and young families that are trying to like bring literacy to their children. You have teenagers that are awkward, that are just looking for a safe place to be after school. You have kids that are like graduated from high school and they're studying, you know, in college. You have homeless people. You have people who are, you know, our most vulnerable in our society that are just, they're trying to beat the heat of Phoenix, Arizona in the summertime and have a place, some refuge for at least 8 hours in the day. If not a little bit more. And then you also have your senior population. You have a lot of people that are widowed and they're lonely and they just want a place. They want to feel like they're connected to some kind of community. So I think like for me, even though it was a complete accident, like I've been able to infuse the things that I'm passionate about, the things that I love in the world and in my own personal work, in my own personal journey, into the job that I have by working at the public library. So that's me. That's what I'm doing. It's not all of who I am. I am also a massive nerd who loves comic books, Star Wars, and science fiction movies.
Yeah, and this is who I grew up around too. You know, I've got a friend from high school. I don't keep in touch too much anymore. He was a letterer in DC Comics. He won an Eisner Award for book design.
That's awesome.
He's now doing manga. Yeah. So and then you mentioned Alex Gray. Had another friend that I've fallen out with, but he was a huge Tool fan. You
Same
know,
here.
and yeah, he's yeah, exactly. I figured that just about that they're pretty much synonymous, Alex Gray and Tool fans, I would imagine. Yes,
annoyingly
synonymous.
So.
Sometimes, yes, sometimes. But as far as turbo nerds go, yeah, I here in England, in London, I got to go to the British Museum, and even though they harvested my data to be able to go into reading rooms, I'm so glad I did, because out of their special collections, they got these things out of special collections for this Buddhist scholarship stuff that I'm interested in, these palm leaves that were written in Burmese. I only saw this on the internet, and I was actually allowed to flip through these with my own hands. It's just incredible. And some old map, that I spread out along this huge table that somebody hand drawn in Burma. So anyway, yeah, it's just, I grew up around libraries, for those of when I was more introverted, that was like a refuge,
Yeah.
and even so, yeah, I can attest to all these different walks of life that come through here, but I digress. What I want to do here is jump into your expertise, actually jump in by jumping back and pulling out a little bit. I love, people can connect so much with the personal story and all that. I want to go into the maybe firsthand lived experience with your experiences here. But I do want to pull out first and kind of set a container here for this topic, because and educate me, because I don't know where the professionalism lies on this. I know I did some precursor journalistic training, but didn't go through with it. And from what I understand, some media organizations have a policy around this, because there is what's known as like a copycat effect. There's something about seeding this in consciousness, but there's also a huge taboo around this. Probably some of it is, I'm just total guessing here, taboo maybe for a good reason, but there's other parts that are not, it doesn't need to be taboo. It does need to be talked about, but I don't know which is which. You know what I mean? So set the kind of the container. What's the standard thinking in professional circles, and then maybe what you agree with and disagree, how you've seen some of this change throughout the years, maybe what kind of recommendations, if there's any kind of parameters or guidelines that you would recommend for people of what to say, what not to say. And one more, I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out really quick, but for those of us who don't have a really intimate lived experience with this, but maybe have a closer secondhand experience, and those who are really far removed. So I think maybe there's a spectrum here, right? From some people who survived maybe attempts, all the way through people who are so removed from this topic that it seems very foreign and disconnected. Although I don't think everybody's that far away from this. You know what I mean? As far as how close it's been to their heart. But yeah, I think that's enough to get you going for a while here.
Yeah, there's so much
before we jump back into your
There's so much to unpack there. I am kind of like an outlier in terms of what a suicide preventionist would be. For one example, people always say, don't use the word committed. Because committed equates to that they knew what they were doing, and that it's also committed as a crime. And I always thought that was the dumbest thing ever. like to me, the bigger threat to somebody who lost a loved one to suicide or groups of people that said that their loved one committed a sin. That to me is a bigger threat than somebody who lost a loved one to suicide using the word committed. You know, like committed isn't always about crime. Like we can split hairs about like the discussion of like they weren't in their right mind, so but the other side of the word, the terminology is committed. They equate it to like, oh, committing a crime, but that's just like dumb. Like I was committed to writing my book. I was committed to riding my bike across the country. And for a split moment that my brother couldn't take back, he was committed to ending his pain. All right. So like to me, like that was always a dumb argument. And I've seen people be shamed while they're expressing their pain. It's like this person is expressing their pain and you're going to shame them because they use the word committed instead of died by, which I just like, so I always push back against that. I always just thought that was ridiculous. Like, you're not going to tell me how I lost my brother to suicide. Don't even think about telling me how to express like my loss. You want to express your loss one way, that's cool.
I totally agree. There's so many people trying to control language on so many levels now.
Yeah.
It's really rampant. I won't go into that. We'll just keep it to this topic. But yes,
Yeah. I also like another way, I'll just say this with like the idea of like controlling language is that like people will be deplatformed if they use the term suicide or killed themselves. So they have to say unalived themselves. And to me, that's just like another thing that's just I don't get it. Like when you try
it's
to
wokeism
alter,
gone too far, I think. And that reminds me, I don't even know. I totally forgot about that. I'll have to check platforms, but this is more important than what platform it can be on and what not. We'll deal with that later.
I wouldn't I
So
wouldn't say that it was
it's
like
self-censorship
wokeism.
too,
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's wokeism.
Yeah.
It's more of like a fear
Okay.
of like of language. I think like when it comes to like
Oh, yeah.
suicide, that it's more there is like this anxiety about copycatism. But to me, if you dance around a subject, if you try to something like suicide and mental health, you have these are important things that like as a society we need to talk about, both on my side of the planet, your side of the planet, everywhere. Like it's important to talk about and to be afraid to talk about them. That's where we get into like danger. That's where the taboo is created. I can understand or at least be somewhat sympathetic when it comes to how it was done. And I made clear in my book that I am going to mention how my brother did it. So if that's something that you where because of where you are in your own healing journey, like maybe stop reading right now. I put that in there. I can understand that being something, because if you had a loved one who died and chose a very interesting way, it might be like, oh well, I could do it that way. So that I can understand. I could be somewhat sympathetic. Am I still 100% on board with it? No. Maybe in a mass communication way, I get it. But in one-on-ones or in groups, I think it's okay to talk about methodology. But that's just me. That's something. Methodology is something that is a tightrope for most clinicians, and they try to only bring it up when necessary. But I can be, like I said, I can be somewhat sympathetic to that. In terms of like how you manage it or anything, if you have somebody that is struggling if there's somebody in your life that you care about that is struggling, it could be a best friend, it could be a family member, it could be like a weird acquaintance at work, like somebody that you work with, you don't talk to them all the time, but like you see them enough that they're a part of your life. It's important to ask people straight up, are you considering self-harm? It's better to ask that question than to not, and maybe regret the fact that you didn't ask. you can, it's important to like, to me, like I like making it weird. I like making it awkward. When I see somebody at the office and I'm like, "Hey, what's up? How you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, living the dream." Like I always like make fun of that statement. I was like, "Really? You're living the dream when you were like 5 years old? This was your dream of like what you wanted to live your life, you know? Like let's talk. Let's
I,
have a conversation. If you're not feeling good, like let me know why you're not feeling good. I'm here. I'll listen. I could take it."
that's I'm always baffled by that response too. I don't know if it's complete. This is back up a little bit here. Why do a lot of people say one thing, mean something else, and then do something entirely different a lot of times? But when I hear that, I just wonder, is like, the American dream, I think, I don't know what to say here. All I say is to people sometimes, I say, well, I'm trying to wake up from the dream, is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to wake
Yeah.
up here. But, it's so this is,
I think it's
I
just more of a
did,
way of not to
mm,
talk about it. You know what I mean?
oh,
Like
yeah.
real
But
conversations are difficult or can be.
do you really feel though that a lot of people that answer with that they're trying to gloss over that they're actually feeling really bad, or like what you do you take that when somebody responds that way, pretty much what 90% of the time they're covering up something like you're saying there? Is that
No,
is that
I
what
think I think more than
oh
anything, they're not in the present moment and they're too concerned on what
mm,
they have to do next.
yeah,
And
well,
and so
I see.
and so when I say, are you sure? Was this the dream? Even if it was,
Ah,
like,
there we go.
hey, I
Yeah.
want you to be in the moment right now, and I get locked in my modes of the things that I need to do. But as a supervisor, I look at my, and I know this is like a lot of people hate this, but like I look at my team, like those, like they're not my children, they're not my family, but they are my family, and I'm gonna ride or die for them. You know what I mean? I've only inherited, of the 7 people I have, I've only inherited 2 of them, but like I have a very eclectic group of people around me, and to me, I'm a heterosexual white male. All right. My
Hey.
meat suit and the way that the things that I'm into, that I'm attracted to, narrows my field of understanding this reality. So the more I can engage with people who are different from me, people of color, people of different sexual orientation, people of different gender identity, people that are on the spectrum, people that are off the spectrum, people are somewhere on the spectrum, women, mothers, single women, men, single parent men. Like I try to, like, I'm a cat dad. All right, I don't have children. I've worked with kids. That was like the greatest like birth control. I worked with kids for 16 years, and I was like, yep, I'm way too selfish to have to deal with that. So I like having people around me that are extremely different and walk through this world and have a different perception of reality. And in doing that, I also feel very protective of them. And, I don't want to rob them from their ability to grow and be strong. But I tell them that, like, use me as a tool if you need me to get you out of some hairy shit. you know especially the women that I work with too. Like you have people that are lonely walking around the library, and when they see a pretty girl and who's polite, you know they just want to like latch on to them. So I don't know where I was going with that, but you said something about, well, okay, the presence of mind of, like,
Yes, yes,
like I
yes.
try to, like, even when I'm on my way, I'm on a mission, I've got to work on this project. If I notice any of the people that work under me, or even my counterparts, if I notice that there's something off, I stop and I like, hey, are you okay? I think a lot of people, they're like, oh, you have such a strong intuition. It's like, no, I pay attention to nonverbal cues. I've been around you
Yep.
enough. Like I can recognize people at a distance, and I have horrible eyesight, but if I see the blob at a distance, the fuzzy blob, if I notice their gait, I know who that is because I've recognized the gait in which they walk. I just think, and I think that's been part of my awareness practice, is that I've started to learn the people that I'm with. I've started to
Oh,
learn,
totally.
so when they the way they say something, the way that they subtly move, like boom, there's something that's distracting them. There's something that's on their mind. There's something that they're worried about. So I stop and I ask because I want to know. The world is hard
So
enough.
you're in voice. Yeah, totally. The voice too, the way
Mm-hmm.
people, and you said earlier how it's said, not so much what's said, but how it's said. Now you're talking about your job at the library here,
Mm-hmm.
because usually I think about being at libraries and it's just not so much of a support role, like social support role like that, although I'm sure they're doing it too. I just remember people putting away books, people behind the shelf doing things, but that might just be, me in a small Midwestern town where I lived for a while in a college town. So maybe it's not quite as socially intense as someplace like Phoenix.
Well, I
So
mean,
yeah, it's pretty wild, I think.
but what even the branch that I'm
Go ahead.
at, like it is just putting books on there, and 90% of the questions are like, "Hey, where is this item that I'm looking for?" But that other 10% that does happen, when it happens, is intense. And library staff, and this is something that our society and our citizens don't fully understand, that librarians all around the world are asked to be social workers and they're not trained. So
No,
there
that's
is,
totally, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
and there's a certain grace that librarians of all flavors have had to, maybe they were naturally it was just came natural to them, but others had to like kind of like learn it to bring and provide grace to those people that need it the most, while also knowing when to lay down those boundaries.
Yeah, because there's only so many resources I could imagine sometimes. But yeah, that's a really good point. I don't think that most people consider that the things you probably have to deal with day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not just usually hardly ever just a simple, straightforward question. A lot of times, right? It comes along with all that person has sometimes, for better, worse, or otherwise. And yeah, it's a really really important point. So getting back to now to some of these boundary or these parameters around this topic, you mentioned that there needs to be kind of more openness and less policing and self-policing on what can be said and what should be said, when some people say there's a complete hardline moratorium on the word committed,
Yeah.
and how unhelpful that seems to be to, and then getting maybe people to police themselves. Also, what do you think about people just trying to pull the wool over your eyes to pretend that nothing's wrong when there is? I mean, how do you deal with something like that? And like, I guess you're kind of like a shepherd in a way too, I'd imagine. I don't know if that's the right metaphor or not. Like, how do you get someone from where they are to where they don't even know they may need to be or want to be, without being, maybe intrusive is too hard of a word, but like, or have you ever been off on judging that? And do you get ramifications and blowbacks? Like, or is it worth that risk, to feel that temporary pain of being off, misjudging, or something like this? I would doubt that's sometimes the case, because it does sound like you're pretty cued in to what's going on, mainly due to firsthand experience, I would think. And I think now would be a good time to kind of jump back into, after we set these parameters here, because we're almost getting towards wrapping up even, but then jumping back in to your lived experience with this, and how that's informed what you've kind of how you operate around this topic too,
Well, you can't
and the insights
really.
you've gained.
Yeah. First of all, like how, like, just some of the parameters. You can't force somebody who doesn't want to be helped to get help. All right. And you have to also take care of yourself too. So it's a very delicate dance. The only way an institution would get involved where somebody would be forcibly institutionalized is if there was an attempt they hurt themselves. They're a threat to themselves or other people. That's the only way that that's going to be where somebody is forced into it. In order for you, as somebody who's concerned about another individual that maybe isn't so keen on helping themselves for whatever reason, the best thing you could do is arm yourself with information. So in the States, you can call 988, and that is like the suicide prevention line. People can call in if they're feeling suicidal and get help. But if you have a loved one that doesn't want to get help and you need information, I would call that number and get connected with the local resources and arm yourself with as much information as possible. So ways that you can navigate them, chat with them, talk with them, or also know where to go if something popped off immediately. And then as for my own experience, what is it that you would like to know? It's such a loaded, like, large question.
Totally it is. So let's step back here again, and I keep wanting to step back because this is so sensitive, because here someone like me that's from the outside, and I've heard a few things that I find might be helpful, but like I say, there's some of these things in this field where the people going through this stuff, they don't really have, and rightfully so, I think, don't have a lot of respect for people that don't have lived experience with this. There's this thing, well, how can they really know what I'm going through if they haven't even gone through this themselves? And I think
Yeah.
it's beyond valid. And the only thing I could say to that is, we all know someone that is super wise, right? So but they haven't had direct experience, but because they're so tuned in, because they're so empathic, I would say, that's really where it comes in, that they can feel very deeply and very sincerely what's, like this mirror. And so those people I respect without having to go through it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but if that's what I would aspire to be, to have something to say about this without having gone through what you've gone through. So I'll just parrot something that I found helpful. It can just be thrown off, and that can be totally cool. And at the same time, when I say this, it comes from a space of, it seems like for me parroting this, it almost seems like it could be at risk of, like, invalidating someone's experience, or you know what I'm saying? Because I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree that your brother. It seems there's no. It's pointless to blame anyone or anything, I think, for this, right? We can come back later to what you find is not helpful around this whole topic. You know, that's what I'm interested in, that too. But just to offer some things of wisdom like this, it seems like it could almost invalidate what somebody's gone through, because you've been through this and it's over and you can't go back and undo it, right?
Yeah.
So with that said, I'll just say, I've met some people that they just, especially maybe younger generations, they don't want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
They think that they're being here is not where they're supposed to be. And what I've heard, it's so wild. But what I've heard in response to that is teaching that the more you choose to be here, the easier it gets. And so then it's taking this kind of an empowerment back and saying, okay, this sucks. It freaking really sucks, really hardcore and bad. However, what would happen if I actually took the power back and chose to be here? Not to fool myself or to kid myself, but how could I choose to be here? And I just thought, wow, that's a really interesting approach that I've never heard before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Everybody.
that's, go
Well,
ahead.
I mean, everybody has their own journey too. As terms of, like, there's all these different missions out there to end suicide, or like, it's, and to me they're laughable. trying to cut down on how many suicides happen is um, more possible than eradicating suicide, because like the one thing that like we're not getting to, the one thing that some organizations who are into suicide prevention and activism, um, they're not looking at how a major problem that I see in our society, and that is that like we have a very sick society. Now, that what does that mean? It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but to me, I think it also goes to like our value system. You know, um, we're more we're I mean, just things that are happening right now in our country. We're more inclined to use our resources to terrorize and brutalize people rather than to feed people that are hungry. I don't think homelessness should exist. you know, I don't think we, I don't think people should be kicked out of their homes because they chose to get a medical procedure done and all their money went to that. There's a sickness in our society because there is a lack of awareness. To go all the way back to like what I started at, awareness is the only game in town. And the way that people usually come to a journey, awareness, self-awareness, social, situational, spatial awareness, is something that you can be, like any other skill you could be born with. Some people can pick up a basketball and they could just play. Some people can pick up a guitar and they could just jam. Some people pick up a pen and they can just write beautifully. Awareness is the same thing, but you could also learn it. And right now there's many paths to becoming an cultivating awareness, but there's kind of like two primary, and one is, man, I need a humanities course for my degree. So I guess I'll take this mythology class, or I'll take this Eastern philosophy class, or I'll take this Western philosophy class, and their mind is blown for a semester. And maybe it latches on and they go on a journey. The other path to like finding this awareness is through trauma. Something horrible happens to you, and either you have a really good social safety net that allows you to get help immediately, or you go on a long journey and it's a lot of like, people coming in and helping you here and there, but like you're doing a lot of this work on your own and you go on this massive journey of self-discovery. Uh, I don't think the way that we choose to live as a species is the most optimal way for it. Now, I'm not saying that like, I mean, the wellness industry is even a little bit weird. Like you have people that are like, oh, well, if you just went to yoga and you just did an ice bath every morning and you just went into like a red light sauna, like you'll totally be healthy. And it's like, no, not everybody can afford that. So I don't think, and you can't change a problem as dire as mental health, as dire as the way you can't change the system with the rules that built the system. You have to find a new paradigm. So that's the whole thing about awareness. I don't have answers to how this I'm at phase 1 of recognizing the problem. And so for the kids that are like, I just don't want to be here, the first thing that I would say to that is like, yo, I get you. I understand you. You are seeing things and you know in your heart, this is not the way we should be living. This is not the way we should be treating each other. This is not the best that we have to offer, and that we are not being led by the best among us. Now that you have that information, how do you want to participate? How do you want to like live your life to make your circle of influence healthier? By starting with, how do you make yourself better? It's a long journey, and some
Yeah,
people still
absolutely.
don't want to deal with it. But like that is our quest to figure out how to navigate this world. And in order to figure out how to navigate this world, we have to start with our center of gravity, which is ourselves. Who am I? Who am I on a fundamental level? Who am I outside of state? Who am I outside of like family lineage? Who am I outside of like the religion I was raised in? Who am I outside of the race that I was born into, the meat sack? Who am I outside of my sexual identity, my gender identity, my ableistic identity? Like who am I on a fundamental level? And society, the powers that be do not encourage that because we have to just find our way on that road instead of that road being something that we are being taught how to find at an early age. It's just something that we sometimes fall into. So I think that is a major problem, and that is something that we have to like encourage other people to do. And I think that has
Couldn't
consequences of affecting our mental health.
Couldn't agree more. Know thyself, right? And you so
Yeah.
beautifully illustrated that in such a practical, down to earth, everyday level. There's a bunch of stuff you said there I pick up on briefly. And, this sick society, what is that Krishnamurti quote that being well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is no measure of good health. Um,
Totally.
that really puts things in perspective that way. And I would say there's a lot more sicker things in society going on that you've mentioned that's not for like a somewhat considered family friendly podcast, that it goes really dark and really, so this is this ethical core, I think, of non-harming too. And that
Yeah.
acknowledgement that you said about how things actually are, and being honest with ourselves, and how I am and how things are, but not stopping there and wallowing in it if I don't have to, but just not kidding myself, not fooling myself. But then
Mhm.
what can I do? What can I do about it? Where should we place this attention that the marketers are so spending so much time and energy trying to get our attention? And then how do we pay attention? Also, how are we viewing something, and how are we responding to it? This is within our seeming agency or choices that we have, that no matter what happens to us, we can choose how we view things and how we respond to them, what we pay attention to and how we pay attention to it. And yeah, like you said, now this double-edged sword, I think, though, of I'm just gonna the whole notion of this topic. On one hand, yeah, I don't want to deny it and pretend and hide my head in the sand and pretend it's not there and going on in society. On the other hand, how much do I need to really keep dwelling on it and repeating it and going over and over? Because some say that the unconscious mind, it doesn't know a negative, right? When you tell kids slow down. You don't say stop running,
Mhm.
because if we're not tuned in and there's not enough awareness there, some say that they don't hear the stop, or they don't hear the stop. They just hear the running part. But they give the alternative of what to do instead of what not to do. And I think you already beautifully illustrated that as well. And yeah, that's so. I I don't. Hopefully, that's not too insensitive for people who have gone through this, or blaming of what has happened, because that's another double-edged sword. How do we validate those who have gone through this, and respect their journey, and tap into their wisdom, and also help kind of prevent and go on from there, you know, uh, without invalidating those other experiences. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm bumping up against here.
Well, I
What
think
do
like
you what do you think about that, or how do you
I've
say
told a
that?
lot of people when I was in like the support groups, people would complain like people, my friends don't get it. They're like, why are you still sad? Why are you still sad? And I would just tell them like, unfortunately, we have to retrain people how to teach us. And by doing that, we're going to lose some people and we're going to gain some people. The people who don't get it, boy, aren't they lucky. And, like that means that we might have to have if we're asking for compassion because of we're feeling the pain, we also have to extend the compassion for their ignorance. And that's hard to do when you're in pain. So it's really up to you writing your own playbook. Because there's no like how to, it doesn't matter what the loss is, whether you lost somebody to suicide or you lost somebody to cancer, you lost somebody. It could even be like you were in a relationship and they broke up with you. Yeah. And it's not a straight line. There's no time limit
on grieving, right?
Yeah, and it's not a straight line either.
That's right.
It's a four-dimensional roller coaster.
Not black and white, cut or dry, is it?
Yeah, so it's really like there's some people, like anything else, like I said a few minutes ago, people are born with certain thing, and hold on to the people that were born with a great sense of empathy. That like that don't have the lived experience, but are willing to like learn what you need in that situation. Because even empathy will only take you so far. If you don't have the lived experience, like I'm never gonna know what it's like for a woman to go through what they have to go through in a patriarchal society. I'm never gonna know. I'm not a woman, but my empathy can take me as far as to be like, please educate me. Like, how can I be better? And how can I be better for you and make you feel safe around me? So if you know somebody who lost a loved one to suicide and you've never experienced but you have a profound sense of empathy, like ask questions, like let them know that you're there for them, that like you don't want to judge them, and you want to, if you say something that is harmful, just tell me that was harmful and that hurt you, and I will, let's have the conversation. Don't ignore the conversation. We don't want to ignore the conversation of mental health so that somebody does take their own life. But if you're dealing with somebody who's lost somebody to suicide, we also want to keep the conversation going so that we learn how to navigate and can be supportive for the people that we love that are going through this horrible, horrible experience. So, and for those people that aren't empathetic, you don't have to be friends with everybody all the time. It's and you don't even have to. You just. I love you, but I'm gonna love you from a distance because you're not good for me right now.
Yeah, that's the most compassionate thing we can do sometimes is set those strong boundaries and send compassion from afar. That's right. Okay, so another thing that occurred to me with this is some people have these maybe thoughts, but they're like, wait a second, this is ridiculous. Where's this thought coming from? I don't want anything to do with this act. You know what I mean? And so the teaching that I've heard on this too is that what if it's not a personal thought, that someone is actually tuning into the collective, And so that made a lot of sense to me too, that maybe this isn't something that's a personal desire or want from me, but this notion of the collective consciousness and how some people can kind of tap into that and not even realize they're tapping into it. Now, I don't know if that's magical thinking or that's complete delusion there too, but yeah, go ahead.
Well, you don't even have to get like, I like that thought. I've never heard it put that way. It's very creative, and it's like I love the whole idea of collective consciousness, but you don't even have to go that far. Like you're on the right track, but you went a little bit off the trail because you wanted to get a better vantage point. You know what I mean? But like you could still say the same thing without putting so much like glitz and glamour on it. Like,
how would you reframe it? Take that.
Well, I would just say like
take that wisdom and knowledge and reframe it.
We don't have to own any of our thoughts. Like, oh, I'm a fatty, I shouldn't eat that cupcake. I don't have to own that thought. I don't have to own the thought that I'm a bad person. I don't have to own the thought that I did something stupid. Like, how many times have you woken up in the middle of the night?
Believe it.
Yeah, how many times have you woken up in the middle of the night and you remember something? I don't know how old you are. I'm in my 40s. I'm going to be 48 this year. But I remember something I did when I was 6 years old, and I'm like embarrassed by it, and I'm reliving it, and I'm like, shit, I wish I would have done it this way. That to me, attaching myself to a thought and experience that, like, even though I did it and I lived through it and I experienced, I'm not that person anymore. I'm 40 plus years removed from that person. You know what I mean? And like, so it's like getting locked into like these thoughts, and just, that's another thing about awareness, is that like taking a step back and being aware of thoughts and looking at them more like, instead of their, a bone in your body or a cell in your body, they're passing clouds. And it takes a lot of practice to get into that. But like, it doesn't matter if it's like a suicidal ideation, or like, man, my butt looks big in these pants. Like, you don't have to like take ownership of any thoughts. Be aware of them, you know, observe them, but don't take ownership. And that in itself is its own practice.
Oh, totally agree there. It's just that, okay, where they're not mine, that's not who I am, that's not me. I'm not made up of that. At the same time, there they are. I don't necessarily, know where they're coming from, because it seems like there are thoughts where we can have a seeming sense of agency and make them happen. And then there's other things, like you just illustrate so well. It happens all the time, especially for those practicing mindfulness and looking directly at their own mind. Things just arise in the mind without me even wanting it to happen. This is very common, meditators. The fact is, it's there, so I'm responsible for it. It's not me. I don't need to believe it. It's not who I am. And yeah, but what do I do with it? And a lot of times, nothing. Like you're saying, it's just like just a, just a faint
Sometimes,
blip, and then
sometimes I have a thought of like what it would be like to go take a shit at the salad bar at Wendy's. It's a thought. I don't act on it.
You don't mean do you mean in the salad bar, or you mean just going to Wendy's and using the bathroom?
On the salad bar at
the
Wendy's.
Salad bar, yeah.
Right next to the croutons.
It might improve the flavor. I don't know.
It depends on what your diet was before.
So yeah, exactly. Of course, you see how you kind of can figure out where that might lead if you follow through with it, right?
Yeah. But I liked your approach to it. Like that, it's a much more esoteric like approach to it. But not everybody's on that level, so you kind of like have to, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that's why
it depends who you're talking to, and that's kind of a more spiritual approach. People might just be like, "What?" I don't know how streetwise that one is, but it's for a certain jet set, I guess, certain crowd. Yeah,
totally.
Well, cool, Thomas. It's been I've learned a lot here. I appreciate your kind of cut the crap approach to all this, and being real and gritty and straightforward on this. And yeah, it means a lot. And you've taken something and you've turned it into kind of I don't like this word a lot, hero, but you did say hero's journey, and it's not in the derogatory sense. Obviously, it's like those of us who have gone through something are now like heroes and role models for people still going through it. And that is the bright side. Oh, that's one other thing that I left out here, that this notion of how do we, since I do meditation and a lot of this is meditation-based podcast, how do we expand awareness? And you talked about, yes, being inspired and learning about like yogis, and that the Eastern culture and some philosophers in the West too. Wow, they can really blow our mind and really turn us on to that there's way more in our experience than we're kind of led to believe through normal everyday life, whatever that is anyway. But then we have this notion of trauma, and I totally agree. And it's unfortunate, but we can use this as kind of like maybe a dark awakening, or use it to accelerate awakening. However, I don't want to have this as an excuse for those who are abusers to say, "Oh, I'm just here to teach you a lesson. I'm here to help you wake up." It's not
Totally.
somebody's got to do this job because humanity's so asleep, and I'm just playing this role, and it sucks, but hey, without me, you would never wake up. You would just go through the incarnational cycle over and over again, which I think is kind of a retroactive defense of people abusers doing what they do, and then later
Also, like,
this is more on a spiritual level too.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
but
But there is something to it. But like someday we'll get to a point where we won't even need trauma to expand consciousness and awareness.
totally,
You know
it'll
what I
just
mean? And I don't
it'll
think
be.
we necessarily need it now. But I mean, this is go ahead. Yeah, you
Well, yeah,
have
yeah,
something to
yeah.
say on this for
I
sure.
think, yeah, yeah. Like, hopefully there would be a society that just like embraces the cultivation of awareness, and that becomes part of our initiation rite. We don't even have like a real initiation rite. And as for like the abusers out there, they'll be like, "Well, I'm just doing this so you should wake up." You're not responsible for my awakening. To think that you are is the highest degree of narcissism, which means you're a toxic person. You know what I
Oh,
mean? So,
totally,
so,
totally, yeah,
but like, yeah,
absolutely.
I think one thing that I would like to write before I die is like a curriculum for how to expand awareness starting in kindergarten or preschool, and have somebody who's much smarter than I am when it comes to like child development and education to take that, expand on it, and just continue to work on that. I think
Yes,
I think I think
please,
I think it would,
absolutely, so
like,
needed.
yeah, it would be great if we had like a class that started in preschool that, like, math, science, curricula, like humanities and stuff like that, social studies, that was just a class about you, and you were just taught how to navigate yourself, how to interact with your own emotions, how to interact with the thoughts that you have, how to learn about yourself, and how to figure out who you are on a fundamental level through experimentation, meditation, and excavation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. We have this amazing faculty of awareness, but in schooling system, it's all about what it's focused on, the the
Mm-hmm.
the object or the subject of it. But the mere fact that we can do that awareness can know something, can pay attention, to bring light to whatever it is. It's like standing up in a theater and turning around and looking at the projection. We're not taught about this amazing mystery of awareness in a way, or how to cultivate it and even acknowledge it. Usually it's just, what can we do with it.
Wow,
And so yeah.
you just brought up something. I'm reading this book by Rupert Spira. I swear to God, I like. Have you read him before?
No, I know this guy. He's a big non-dual guy, right?
Well, being aware of being aware is the book that I'm reading
Yes,
right
aware of
now, and like,
awareness.
and
Yeah.
he talks about how, like, awareness is always there. He doesn't use the word frequency, but like that's the way I look at it. It's like a frequency. It's always there, and like and he uses them theater. The screen on a theater is awareness, and these are things that are just happening. And when the character dies, that character is dead, but the screen is still there, and awareness lives on. So yeah, I think we as a society have a lot to learn about ourselves. Evolution didn't stop with our thumbs.
No, it better not.
All right, I'll stop rambling.
No, that's great, Thomas. You're getting closer to my heart there with the awareness. It's I can go on and on about it. It's such a, yeah, a huge almost mystery, but it's something we're just using every day. And it's quite amazing. I'm failing here with such a lack of eloquence, but people already know, can tap into the profundity of awareness, of course. So I think with that, Thomas, would you like to leave people with a message? And where can people find out more about your work? Do you have any irons in the fire? I don't know, events, anything else you want to draw people's
I'm
attention to or promote?
I
And
got
then,
my
yeah, take us out with a message.
Yeah, I got my book 2012 A Bicycle Odyssey about my cross country bike ride. It's more of my it's more of a memoir about that. I am working. I feel like I just cracked the code on my outline, but I'm working on a follow up to 2012, which is just the Rise philosophy, revolution inspired self evolution, which is a really pretentious way of saying know thyself. It rolls off the tongue, and I came up with it
It's
about 15 years ago, and I've grown
no,
beyond
it's
it, but I like
flavor.
it.
I feel
Yeah,
it. You can
yeah,
feel that.
yeah.
It's got a lot of flavor to it. Yeah.
So I'm writing up a follow up, which is just the Rise philosophy, which is a really big into self awareness and awareness. Hopefully, it won't take me 10 years to write or 11 years to write like this last one. That's like the main thing. You can go to my Instagram, underscore rise underscore philosophy, and you can go to my website, www.risephoenix.org. Yeah, I have millions of ideas, but enough time for a few things. So we'll see what the future holds.
Well, so cool, Thomas. Thanks again for joining, and may all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free and be well too. Bye now.